Good evening. Welcome to the News Charter School Board of Directors meeting for January 25th, 2022. I will call the roll to establish a quorum. Nicole.
Here.
Michelle.
Here.
Rodney.
Here.
Jason.
Here.
Jennifer.
Here.
Robbie. Benji.
Here.
And Paul. Okay. All right. Having established a quorum, I hereby call the News Charter School Board of Directors meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. on January 25th, 2022. I will now read the ethics statement. Conflict of interest reminder per North Carolina General Statute 138A-15E. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict of interest, of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will be abstained from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. Okay. We will move on to the reading and approval of the January emergency meeting minutes. We can read these aloud or silently, or if everyone has read them, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or any corrections? Hearing none, I will call the roll to approve this January emergency meeting minutes. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
Has Paul joined? I don't think so. Okay. Okay. Minutes approved. Okay. The next thing on our agenda is public comment. And my understanding, Brad, is that we do have one person signed up to give public comment.
We do have one person signed up, but they are not present.
Okay. We will go ahead and move on. And if you could let me know if and when they join, we can circle back to public comment. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. We are not going to have guest discourse. Dr. Carpenter has joined, but he's not going to be doing micro training this month for the sake of time given our agenda. So moving on to correspondence from our authorizer, Dr. Blackwell, do we have any correspondence from our authorizer?
We do not. The bylaws have been uploaded in Epicenter, and we are just waiting to hear back from those, but otherwise we don't have anything.
Wonderful. Thank you. Once we get those approved, we will be working on establishing those new committees for that structure in the new bylaws, but look forward to hearing back from that. Okay, so moving on then to your superintendent report.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I am going to actually let Mr. Sharp go first so that he can do his presentation of our audit findings, and then he can head on out. So Jay, I'll let you take it from here.
All right.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on this evening. My name is Jay Sharp. I'm the partner in charge for the school's audit for June 30th, 2021. I am going to apologize. My voice isn't that great. Unfortunately, I did contract COVID and I'm recovering from that. So I do apologize for that. So I have a short presentation to go through regarding the audit. I'll talk about the audit proceedings, the results of the audit, and do some numbers analysis. So I'll share my screen and go through that, and I'll be glad to take any questions once I am done with that presentation. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So all right, perfect. So the status of the audit, field work has been completed. The financial statements have been prepared. The audit has been approved and has been issued. There was a significant change to the approval process this year. In past years, every charter school audit had to be reviewed and approved by the local government commission. There was a general statute introduced back in August that kind of took the local government commission out of that review process. And so the local government commission moving forward will no longer be required to review and approve charter school audits. That'll be completely up to the responsibility of the Department of Public Instruction. Currently, they don't have the necessary department to have a detailed review that the LGC had, but I expect in the future that they will. You're still required to submit to the DPI, but like I said, the LGC is out of the picture as far as reviewing and approving audits. It does make the process a little quicker from our perspective because it usually takes them 2 to 3 weeks to review and approve those audits. So the process is a little bit quicker of getting the audit completed this year because of that. We are currently working on the 990 tax return. For anybody new to the board, this is an informational tax return. The school does not pay any taxes, but this is an important document because it is public knowledge. Anybody can review 990 tax returns, can look up your previous 990 tax returns. The numbers come from the audit, but there's some additional information about the school with this tax return. Once we complete this and submit it, the school approves it and we submit it to the Internal Revenue Service. There's various websites that it comes up on. It usually takes 4 to 6 months to get up. However, because of the pandemic, the Internal Revenue Service is seriously backed up. You've probably seen news stories about that. So it might take up to a year for the 2021 990 to get up on these websites. But the previous 990s for the school can be viewed on various websites. We use guidestar.org to review 990s. But that's an important document. And once the school does receive the draft, review that completely to let us know if there's any issues with that 990 before we give it to the Internal Revenue Service. All right, so that's the status of the audit. Roles and objectives, a little background information. Nothing's changed from previous years, but just a reminder of what we do. We don't just start crunching numbers. There's some things we do ahead of the process or at the beginning of the audit. It's called planning. And the planning procedures kind of give us a roadmap on how we're going to conduct an audit on an annual basis. Most of that revolves around understanding or getting an update of our understanding of internal controls in place at the school. And sometimes we will test those controls. For 2021, we tested the controls over cash disbursements and over payroll. So from our understanding of internal controls in place and from the results of our tests of controls, we have a risk-based audit approach. We perform what you call a risk assessment. We are going to assess risk to each of the significant financial reporting areas of the school. Revenues, expenses, cash, for example. We are going to concentrate our audit procedures on the higher risk areas. However, we are going to touch every significant financial reporting area of the school. And we do this to perform audit procedures to obtain sufficient audit evidence to render an opinion on the financial statements. That is why you hire us, is to give an opinion. That opinion itself concentrates on whether the financial statements are free from material misstatements. this is a reasonable assurance. So just a little background on our roles and objectives. Like I said, the risk assessment kind of gives us the roadmap on how we're going to perform our audit year in and year out. So the results of the 2021 audit, I think you'll be happy with this. Scope and timing of the audit were on track. No issues there. Happy to report, we issued an audit with an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. That is the best possible opinion you can receive, a clean opinion on the financial statements. That is the opinion that the school should strive for year in, year out. So first thing is a clean opinion on the financial statements. Good news there. So during the audit procedures, if we note any significant issues or material weaknesses, we're required to issue a finding if we note those. I'm happy to report there were no findings for 2021. And just a reminder, this is a two-part audit. There's a financial aspect of the audit, but because of the state appropriations you're receiving, there's also what we call a single audit or a compliance audit. So it's really a two-part audit, but there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies noted both with financial reporting and with compliance. So good news there for the school. And finally, as a part of the results, I always like to talk to those charged in governance, the board, if during our audit proceedings, we noted any audit adjustments. And so for 2021, we didn't have any audit adjustments. That's great news for the board because that means you can become comfortable with the numbers you're getting throughout the year. Because obviously you make key decisions based on the numbers. So we had no audit adjustments this year. And as auditors, we try to find at least one every year. But that's good news. Obviously, you do contract out with Acadia, who does a good job of keeping up with the books. But so the results of the 2021 audit, just kind of summarize, clean opinion, no findings, and no audit adjustments for 2021. So good news all around. In addition to the audit, we're required to issue a separate letter called a communications letter. And there's 4 main talking points with this letter. First off, are there any changes to significant accounting policies in the notes to the financial statements? For 2021, there were no changes to significant accounting policies. One of the areas we pay close attention to during our audit procedures are estimates. There are some numbers that are hard and fast numbers. There are some numbers that are estimates. The key estimate that the school has relates to its capital assets and the estimated depreciable lives of those capital assets. We looked at those and they appeared reasonable, no issues there. I'm happy to report no disagreements with management and no difficulties encountered whatsoever. Complete cooperation from everybody at Acadia and from everybody at the school during the audit process. We appreciate that because that allows us to complete the audit in a timely fashion. So now we're going to move to the numbers. And I think you'll see, we kind of talked about this last year, but you'll see a good trend when we start looking at the comparative analysis for the school. The first few slides are going to concentrate on the highlights for 2021. So for 2021, the school had total support and revenue of just below $8.3 million. Total operating expenses of about between $7.9 and $8 million. So the school showed a profit or a change in fund balance of $310,000. This is the second year in a row that the school showed a significant profit with operations. So good news there, shows that the school had a healthy financial year. If we break that out into a little bit more detail, looking at the top line items for both revenues and expenses, for revenues, once again, as will be the case every year, your top revenue line item is state appropriations or funds you receive from the state of North Carolina. That was over $6.1 million for the year. Second, we have boards of education. The main component of that obviously is Johnson County, but that was over $1.6 million for the year. Then you received about $350,000 in federal funding, other revenue sources of $85,000, and finally contributions and donations of about $15,000. These top 5 revenue line items make up, as you can see, 99.97% of your total revenues. So it makes up all your revenues for the year. Now, if we look at expenses, your top line item, once again, is salaries and wages, over $4.1 million for the year, followed by employee benefits of $1.7 million, rent of just over $800,000, contracted student services of $525,000, and books and supplies of $163,000. These top 5 line items make up 92% of your total expenses for the year. Finally, for the highlights for 2021, this is not an actual financial statement, but some analysis I think is very important. Cash flows, kind of a summary of where your cash flows are coming from and where they're going to. Cash flows are broken up into 3 categories. Cash flows from operating activities, investing activities, and financing activities. So for 2021, one of the more important line items, you had a positive cash flow from operating activities of $441,000. That means you're able to generate positive cash flows from your mission, educating children. That's a great number to have there. Cash flows from investing activities were negative $5,000. But that's not a bad thing. You were taking cash and investing it back in the school in the form of purchase of capital assets. And finally, cash flow from financing activities, negative $38,000. Once again, that's not a bad thing. You're paying down your long-term debt. But overall, you had a net increase of nearly $400,000. Last year, you had about $400,000 net increase in cash also. So that's 2 straight great years of cash flows for the school. Indicates that the school had a very good 2021 year. Next, we're going to do some comparative analysis. And I said, I think the school has been trending in the right direction, definitely over the last few years. Here we're looking at revenues and expenses for the last 3 years. Red represents revenues, blue represents expenses. Revenues have gone up each of the last few years. Back in 2019, you were at 7.9, almost $8 million. You crossed $8 million threshold in 2020, and you continue going up. Like I said, over $8.2 million for 2021. Your revenues also, your expenses also have gone up. But as you can see, you've shown a profit each of the last 3 years. Your revenues have outpaced your expenses each of the last 3 years. So it shows that the school is in good financial condition. Fund balance. This kind of reiterates what I was just talking about. Fund balance represents your total profitability of the school from day one of operations through a certain time period. Or another way of thinking about it is your assets outnumbering your liabilities. We go all the way back to June 30th, 2015. The school actually had negative fund balance for 2 straight years. And then starting at 2016, you've seen a steady increase in your fund balance. You've shown profits every year since that negative fund balance year of June 30th, 2016. You're at over $2.3 million in fund balance at the end of June 30th, 2021. Shows that the school is financially healthy and has made great strides over the last several years in its overall financial condition. Some short-term liquidity risk ratios we look at. First of all, cash reserves for operations. We generally recommend this to be 3 to 6 months. We're looking at your unrestricted cash and comparing it to your prior year expenditures. How long can you continue operating if you receive no more cash inflows? And this is increased for 2021. The years are off. It should say 2021. But you increased to 70 days. And so that's good news. You've increased your cash reserves. As I said, goes hand in hand with your fund balance increasing and you showing a profit. I've already made note that your cash overall went up compared to last year. So that's great news there and shows that the school has minimal short-term liquidity risk. The other thing we look at is working capital. We are comparing your current assets to your current liabilities. Basically, are you able to pay off your current obligations with the current assets in place? We generally recommend this to be 3 to 1. The school's had an outstanding ratio over the last several years. It went slightly down in 2021, but nothing to be concerned with because it's still 19 to 1. So you have 19 times more current assets and current liabilities. And like I said, we generally recommend at the minimum to be 3 to 1. So you're well over that minimum recommendation. Shows that the short-term liquidity risk is minimal for the school and that the school is financially healthy in the short term. Finally, breakdown of how you spent your money in 2021. There's 5 major categories, and most charter schools spend their money. For your school, you really had 2 major areas you're spending your money in 2021. You have minimal debt service and minimal capital outlay. I've already talked about that with your cash flows. That was about $5,000 and $38,000. But if you look at this, 77% of your overall expenses were used on instructional services, what you're in the business of doing, or your mission, instructing children, compared to 22% for system-wide support services. Now, charter schools are handcuffed a little bit because of the way the Charter of Accounts works, that DPI regulates and tells charter schools how they have to account for expenses. And so, because of that handcuff and the way you break down some of your expenses like rent and stuff, we usually see charter schools having a low instructional percentage. I think of all the schools we worked with in 2021, your school probably has the highest percentage being used toward instructional services at 77%. We generally see it anywhere from 60 to 65%. This is an outstanding number. It shows that the school is spending the money where it should, and something that should be, advertised. And this will show up in your 990, but it tells anybody, that's looking at how your school spends their money that it's spending in the right place. So that's an outstanding number to have. But with that, I'll be glad to take any questions you have on the audit procedures, the results of the audit, or the numbers themselves.
Hey Jay, just one question for me. When you were covering the federal funding and the income side, the ESSER money that we get, would that have been under that number?
Yes, that would have been. Yes.
And we would have only reported the amount of money that we drew down, which we had spent back out, right?
That's correct. Only the money you drew down would have been reported as revenue for 2021. Correct.
Got it. Okay, because there's still additional dollars that are out there that, as we spend down over, I think it's over a year or 2 years or whatever it is, time period. So I just want to make sure that captured what we actually drew down and spent. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously there was some extra money that's federal related, and you received some additional money from the state because of COVID also. But that's only the money you drew down. Yes, that's correct.
Jay, just wanted to say thanks again for your work on the audit this year. You have any recommended next steps for us or opportunities for improvement that you would recommend for us?
Like I said, we see any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Your fund balance looks great. I would concentrate on that cash reserve number, trying to build that up, as much as possible. 3 to 6 months is what we recommend. And it's getting close to that. Your cash has increased, but that calculation is based on cash versus expenditures. So that's always a number to focus on, but everything else looks great and financially healthy. As I said, no issues with compliance, no issues with financial reporting, but that'd be the one area I'd look at is to build that cash reserve number up as much as possible.
Sounds great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jay, for everything and for explaining it. This, I think you did such a good job of walking us through it in a way that everyone could understand, and that's not always easy when you're talking about finances, so or a detailed audit like you did. So thank you so much for that and for everything that you all do to, just to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing.
Sure, you're welcome. Yeah, it is a little difficult because you're not for profit, but you're reporting everything based on government, and government financial statements are not the easiest to read.
Madam Chair.
Sure, Dr. Carpenter.
Jay, I'm not a board member. I'm a consultant to the board. I'm also a certified fraud examiner. And anytime I'm happy to be in a meeting where the auditor is presenting, which is one of my recommended best practices. So very glad to see you here tonight doing this. I like to get the auditor to reinforce to the board that the purpose of an audit is not to detect fraud, that the responsibility for preventing and detecting fraud frontline lies with the board and management. Would you just briefly speak to that and reinforce that concept for the board's benefit?
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of the audit is to give an opinion on the financial statements, whether the financial statements are materially correct or not. As part of our procedures, we're required to take, fraud into account, but our job is not to find fraud. Obviously, if we ever did, we would, have to report that to the board.
Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted to note, Jay, thanks for that presentation, and I thought it was one of the best ones I've seen on finances, and thanks to Benji and Rodney and the committee for doing a great job in keeping him on and moving forward with this.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? All right, Jay, thanks so much. We appreciate your time. And as always, we are grateful for your expertise and your willingness to come and talk with us and share all of the things that you found. I'm actually pretty thrilled with the instructional piece of that. And it's quite flattering to know that we had one of the highest scores in that area, because I think it's important to our families to know that our money is going to our children. So thank you for highlighting that too. Thank you for having me. And anything else comes up, any questions, feel free to reach out. All right. Thanks. Feel better. Thanks. Have a good rest of your meeting. All right. Bye. Okay. With that being said, I'm going to start sharing my screen. And when I do this, I can't see you all. So I'm hopeful you all can see this. The first item for me this evening is our operational calendar for the 22-23 school year. I'm asking for approval of this calendar this evening so that we can get it to OCS and to DPI. Before I show it to you, it's important to note that this calendar went through several iterations through our leadership team, which is a team of teachers at our school. They were handed this task in October. They created several drafts and they landed on this version. This is a team of K-12 teachers, including counselors and TAs. So I want to make sure that I note that this is a collaborative and collective effort of our staff. To make this as streamlined as possible, the days that are highlighted in red are the days that there is no school. You can ignore July and you can ignore June because those are our summer months. But essentially in August, our teachers would come back on the 1st. Our students would come back on the 8th. That's very much in line with the start of every school year since I've been here. Then you can follow out and see the days that we have scheduled off, including our parent-teacher conference dates, which are scheduled again this year in October and again this year in March. The end of the school year will be on May 19th. I'm going to flip and just hit a couple of highlights here. These are the number of instructional days that this calendar includes, which is 154 total. Quarter 1 and quarter 3 are 38 days. Quarter 2 and quarter 4 are 39 days. The instructional hours that we are required to provide is 1,025. This calendar provides 1,116 and a half, which is a surplus of 91 and a half instructional hours beyond what we are required by the state. So I'll flip back to this calendar and show it to you once more. And I will ask if you have any questions. And if not, I kindly ask that you approve this instructional operational calendar for 22-23.
Thank you for sharing this, Melissa. If anyone has questions, feel free to bring those up.
Dr. Blackwell, I know one of the requests from parents last year was for a legend for some of the abbreviations on here. The H is for holiday, definitely, but the NDs, the ALs, could we add those definitions to like a legend to tell what those are for the parents' benefit?
Absolutely, we will. I just made it as streamlined as possible for tonight, but absolutely, they're actually red and blue. There is a legend that exists, yes, and I can add that when I publish this out to our community, for sure.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Dr. Blackwell?
Dr. Blackwell, this is Michelle Denning. Just a quick question. Can you just highlight are there any significant differences from this current school year to the new proposed calendar?
There actually aren't. We have one more work day than we had last year, but for the most part, there are no significant differences. I think last year our differences were pretty significant because we had required and optional and virtual, but that's not the case for us in the next coming year. So,
thank you.
Dr. Blackwell, and this may be on the screen and it may be too small for my eyes to see, but do you have a proposed graduation date for next year?
May 19th.
May 19th. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Blackwell? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the operational calendar for News Charter School for next school year.
So moved.
Thank you, Rodney. Is there a second?
Second, it's Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Any discussion or additional questions? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll to vote on the motion to approve the operational calendar as presented. Nicole?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Rodney?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Robbie hasn't joined yet. Benji?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries. We have an official calendar for next school year.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. We will get that out to our school community and posted to our website very, very soon. Thank you. Thank you. The next item on my report is in relation to the next round of state-funded teacher bonuses. I shared this with the Finance Committee on the 12th and am now bringing it to you all. It is PRC 203, and it is a $1,000 bonus for teachers. We have 56 teachers. 53 are paid by the state. We have 3 teachers who are paid through grant funding through the IDEA and through Title I, but they are teachers. And so we find ourselves short $7,600 to cover all 56 teachers. So with that in mind, I'm asking for the board to approve the additional funds to cover those other 3 classroom teachers so they can also receive the bonus.
So what was that amount, Dr. Blackwell? $7,600.
Dr. Blackwell, can you, you're requesting the $7,600. Are you requesting that from a particular place, or how, or are you just asking the board to approve funding that?
Approve funding it.
Okay.
And that is within the budget that we've already reviewed. It's not having to come out of a different account or anything. It just comes out of the current account, the same account as normal.
Yes.
It's just an addition for those specific federally funded positions and the benefits to go along with that.
Thank you, Benji. I didn't ask my question very clearly. That's exactly what I was hoping to have shared. Thank you.
Gotcha. And I would like to, so move to Melissa's request. If I could get a second on that, we can discuss or vote.
I second it.
Wonderful. Any discussion or other questions? Hearing none, I will call the roll to vote to approve the $7,600 as requested by Dr. Blackwell. Nicole?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Rodney?
Aye.
Jason?
Aye.
Jennifer?
Aye.
Benji?
Aye.
And Paul?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Moving on, I'm going to share my screen again because I would like to share with you the findings of our Cogna accreditation review. This is in the shared drive, and it is a 14-page document. I am going to highlight two particular sections. I'll zoom in a little bit. Does this help? Does that help everybody see it a little better?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So this is essentially our score. To the right, you can see that the average score is a 2.78, 278.34 to 283.33. News Charter School scored a 299.5. We are absolutely thrilled with this number, especially considering the sheer amount of work that went into this process. And I'd like to highlight the last sentence on this first paragraph right here. It says an IEQ of 275 and above indicates that the institution is beginning to reach the impact level and is engaged in practices that are sustained over time and are becoming ingrained in the culture of the institution. There were findings, these are good things, that they noted, and those are bolded. I will read those just so that I can make sure that everyone sees and hears them. The analysis and use of formative assessment and summative data and staff evaluation processes are used to meet the specialized needs of all students. Resources are aligned with identified student and organizational needs through long-range planning. Stakeholder involvement is solicited and valued in decision-making and support of the school's mission. And hiring qualified leaders and instructional staff and offering leadership opportunities to staff and students can promote staff retention and a positive learning culture. So the last piece down here says, in conclusion, News Charter School has many things of which to be proud and a clear path for improvement. The school has opportunities to build on meeting student needs, a strategic resource management and alignment to needs, and communication with stakeholders. Continued work to recruit, hire, and retain qualified personnel could add to the stability of the school's educational programs and successes. Information from this report is intended to assist the school in its continuous improvement journey. So I had mentioned to you all that we were eagerly awaiting the results and that I would get them to you as soon as I received them. And this is a very quick summary of this information, but you can go back through it and look at it. And the highlighted areas are very helpful. I don't want to kind of dwell on that this evening because there's a lot to cover, but you can see the legend is up here: red for insufficient, yellow for initiating, green for improving, and blue for impacting. Very thankful we did not have any red and we had very little yellow. So again, just a very quick review of the results of this document. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those before I move on.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Blackwell. We'll look forward to looking at it in more detail, but it really speaks to the work that you and your entire staff have done, particularly given the issues presented by the pandemic. So thank you so much for everything that all of you are doing, and really, really excited with the results of this.
Thank you. Okay, and then my last piece of information is just a very quick inform. As you know, we are rolling out our JCC program, and that is moving forward beautifully. We are also preparing to submit to the state on February the 1st a proposed AIG program. We will be focusing on grades 3 through 10. Once we submit this and we receive feedback from the state, I will be bringing this to you in February for a much deeper dive and to share with you what our plans are. But we are excited to work towards implementing an AIG plan for the 22-23 school year in conjunction with our JCC program. So we'll have grades 3 through 10 for AIG, and we'll have grades 9 through 12 for JCC. And we're very excited about what that future looks like for our school.
It's very, very exciting to think and see the direction that we're headed in, and to think about all the students that we'll be able to support and help through both of those programs. Any board members have any questions regarding either of those programs for Dr. Blackwell?
Not so much a comment on just those two things, but as a new board member, hearing all the good news tonight and seeing all the progress that's been made from an audit perspective and all these new programs, hat tip to everybody else who's been here for a long time on making all that happen. So good work, y'all. And hopefully in a few years, we can, Jennifer and I can have some of that same impact.
I have no doubt that you both will.
And Dr. Blackwell, in regards to the JCC program, there is an informational meeting Monday, January 31st. Can you just reiterate that?
Yes, we are having an informational session Monday night here in the high school commons. And I'm gonna tell you that I think that it's at 6 o'clock, but if you'll give me one moment, I will confirm. It is at 6:30. 6:30 on Monday night here in the commons. We've got over 50 people that have RSVP'd. We are very excited about sharing more with our community on Monday night.
Hey, Dr. Blake, for the AIG, you said it was starting at third grade. Is there a logic to picking third grade, or?
That's typically when it starts. K1 and 2 are typically the screening years, which allow them, if we've got kids that are close to it, we can continue to work with them in the classroom to get them to that benchmark score they need to start in third grade. And that is all I have for you this evening. I need closed session, but for now, I am done. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much. That was a really fun superintendent's report. Lots of great news, lots of good movement, and we're headed in the right direction, as Jason said, in so many different areas. So I'm really excited about everything that you presented. Thank you so much. Brad, just briefly, I'm going to circle back and see if the person who was signed up for public comment has joined.
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. If he or she does, please let me know. Thank you.
I thought I saw somebody pop up, but no, am I wrong?
That was another
Okay.
person.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Thanks, Nicole. Oops, sorry, I muted myself. Okay, Benji, the financial report.
Thank you. Good evening. The Finance Committee met back on January the 12th. We discussed a variety of topics in that meeting, including cash gate for athletic events, teacher pay scale, the PRC 203 state bonus plan that we just reviewed with Dr. Blackwell, the annual financial audit, as well as the transfer of an old financial account into the general operating account. And from that information, we already covered the state bonus request. I do have one additional item from the Finance Committee that I'd like to bring before the full board for us to vote on and consider. If now's a good time for us to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Benji.
All right. So for this item, this was at the request of Dr. Blackwell, and with approval of the Finance Committee, I move that we transfer the balance of the 0809 account, which is roughly $22,000, into the 8492 operating account, and that account currently has a balance of roughly 1.3 million. But that is the request to basically move that money out of the old account and put it into our general operating fund.
Second.
Okay, any questions or discussion?
I think it should just be, I mean, this is just being done to just simplify the accounts.
Perfect. Thank you. That's great. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I will call the roll to approve moving that money from the account Benji listed to the other account Benji listed because I don't have the numbers in front of me. Okay, Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney. Jason.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
And Paul.
Aye.
Motion carries.
And that is it for the Finance Committee report.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Benji. And now we move on to the standing committee reports. I hope that fingers crossed, that this is our last meeting with these standing committees that have been inactive, most of which have been inactive for quite a while. As Dr. Blackwell mentioned, our updated revised bylaws are with OCS, and we are expecting to hear back, hopefully before our February meeting, in which case we will be moving forward with the new standing committees and getting those set up and working with Dr. Carpenter to do that. So that being said, though, we are still under our original or our most recent bylaws. And so our standing committees, I know the executive committee did not meet. We've heard from finance committee. Academic affairs did not meet. Resource development, Paul?
No meeting.
Okay, thank you. Board development, Michelle?
No meeting this month.
Thank you. Strategic planning, I know, did not meet. Robbie is not on the meeting yet, so I don't know if facilities, Melissa, did facilities meet?
We did meet, and he was supposed to be connecting, I believe, with Benji about setting up a meeting with the facilities board. So if he hasn't made his way around to you yet, Benji, I know he's planning to do that.
Okay. No, ma'am, not yet.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. I'll get with Robbie.
Okay, perfect. So hopefully we'll be hearing about that soon. Okay, thank you. Our ad hoc committees, our strategic planning ad hoc committee, Benji did not meet, correct?
Correct.
Systematic oversight calendar committee, Nicole? Anything
Nothing
new?
to report.
Okay, and Paul, our policy committee?
No meeting.
Okay, wonderful. And then under unfinished business, our motions log for any possible actions. I know at the last meeting you said that we were up to date on that. Is there anything else that you need other board members to do or need to report about that, Paul?
No, I think that can be closed into standard operating procedure, based on our minutes to just keep that updated.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much. And again, thank you again for all of the work on that. I know that was a massive undertaking, and I know that it will be very, very valuable to us moving forward when we need to go back and find something that has been voted on in the past. So thank you again for that. Okay, moving on to new business, our COVID-19 protocols at our emergency board meeting. We did extend the mask mandate until today in anticipation of tonight's meeting. Dr. Blackwell, it's my understanding that Nurse Joyner isn't able to attend tonight, but that you're going to be presenting updated information to the board.
Yes, that is correct. Nurse Joyner is unable to join us this evening, but she did share with me something that she would like for me to share with you all on her behalf. So I'm just going to read it as my computer makes noise. All right. Are we good? Can you all hear me?
Can hear you perfectly. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
No worries.
So she says, as I may not be able to attend the board meeting today, I did want to prepare a statement. I want to be clear. When a student is quarantined related to COVID positive, COVID symptomatic, or COVID exposed, the quarantine is directed by the Johnston County Health Department. It is not News Charter School nor any of the staff that is directing COVID quarantines. We are required by law to report communicable diseases and follow the guidelines given to us by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and the Johnston County Health Department. All of these guidelines are updated and outlined in the Strong Schools Toolkit. If News Charter School deviates from the directives from the Johnston County Health Department, we will adjust our policies where allowable by the that is a word, y'all, I'm so sorry, communicable disease laws, and move forward. The burden of COVID will then fall to the News Charter School decision makers. Our collective goal should be to keep students and staff on campus and learning in person in a healthy and safe environment. And that is from Nurse Joyner. So what I am going to share with you this evening is 2 documents that I have uploaded into our shared drive again. The first one is the COVID protocols update per the Strong Schools Toolkit. And then the other one is some data that was collected about our school based on the request for information from our last mask meeting. But before I do so, I have something I would like to say as well. Before I go through this, I want to just recognize the fact that I have been at News Charter School for almost 2 years, and the entirety of my time has been dealt with COVID. Not a single day have I been able to see the way News Charter School was before COVID. However, all of these days managing COVID has yet to make me an expert. I'm not trained in communicable diseases. I'm not educated in epidemics, and I can't recite laws regarding medical statutes. I've done my best to remain neutral and simply provide the guidance and directives given to me by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services and the Johnston County Health Department. I attempt to be as factual as possible, but I do recognize that some might feel the data sources are not transparent or factual, or maybe that I have misspoken in the past, or maybe that Nurse Joyner has misspoken in the past as well. And it's important to me that our community knows that I would never intentionally mislead or misrepresent data, and nor would she. I do have a personal opinion on masks. However, I have to think about all of our families and their differences. So when I come before the board, it is my goal to present the facts as they are given to me. And no matter what happens, people are going to be upset. We know that. But if I could ask one favor, it would be that we work to shift our focus on recovering from learning loss, on rebounding from absences, and on moving News Charter School forward as a top K-12 charter school in this state. I'm an educational professional. I can give you an educated opinion on nearly anything within institutional education. And all I want to do is get back to what I do best, and that's raising the bar in K-12 education. So when I go through this, I want you all to just bear in mind, and our community, I am going to do my absolute best to be as factual and as direct as possible. And I hope that if I were to make a misstep, that it is met with grace and someone can just say, hey, I think that's not quite right. And I will fix it all day, every day. And again, I want to recognize that there was concerns about misinformation at the last meeting. And I am going to do everything within my power every day, all day, to make sure that doesn't happen. But I am human. And that's what I want to make sure I say to you all and to our community before I go through this. So the first document I will put up on my screen so that our community can see this. And I will try to zoom in as best I can. Okay, so a couple of things. We have two tables. The first one will show how quarantine rules function within a mask-required school setting. The next one will show how quarantine rules function within a mask-optional school setting. Again, sharing with you the information that I have that has come from pages 15 and 16 of the Strong Schools Toolkit. There are scenarios within this document. The first one is, and this is a big difference between this one and the next one. An individual has close contact with COVID positive individual, including being unmasked outside of the home. The Strong Schools Toolkit advises that they do not have to quarantine and they can return to school with these restrictions. Wearing a well-fitting mask fully, completely in school settings, including at all times during athletics and extracurriculars, and that they social distance as best as possible during lunch and snack. They do not have to quarantine. But the next one is different. If they test positive, if they are symptomatic, or if someone in their home is positive with COVID, they must quarantine from school for 5 days. Once the 5-day quarantine is over, they may return to school as long as they wear a well-fitting mask fully and completely in school settings, included at all times during athletics and extracurriculars, and that they social distance as best as possible during lunch and snack time. Please note, it is important that everyone understands that these scenarios and these actions apply to those who are not vaccinated and are not within the 90-day post-COVID positive window.
I think Dr. Blackwell just got kicked out of the meeting. So until she rejoins, just let's pause for a second and hope that she rejoins, because I know she wants to then share the difference between what she just shared, which is only in mask required school settings. And then she's going to share, as she showed a second ago, what the rules are for mask optional school settings. There you are.
Oh no, how?
There you are.
I'm sorry.
We heard you through the part where you were saying this applies only to unvaccinated and people who are not in unvaccinated people and people who are not in the 90-day window. And that was all, everything that you had said up to that point was all for mask required school settings only, correct?
Okay, so I got through the first page.
Right. And that, and is it correct? Am I correct that that's only mask required school settings?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. So second page.
All right. I'm so sorry. I did not know, because I can't see my screen when I'm sharing it. So thank you for drawing my attention to it. Just text me if it goes out again. I am in the high school building, so hopefully we are okay now.
Yep, we can see it. Thank you again.
Okay. And the next page is the mask optional school setting quarantine rules. And the first row relates to an individual who has a close contact with a COVID positive individual outside of the home, or tests positive for COVID-19, or is symptomatic, or has someone in their home who is COVID positive and can isolate from the COVID positive person. If one of those scenarios applies, that individual must quarantine from school and all extracurricular activities and may not return to school for 5 days, beginning the day after exposure. Once they return, they may do so if they wear a well-fitted mask fully and completely in school settings, including at all times during athletics and extracurriculars, and they social distance as best as possible during lunch and snack time. So there is a difference there, because this section here with a mask required school setting does not prompt a quarantine, as noted right here. I just want to draw attention to the difference. And then the next part says that an individual has someone in their home who is COVID positive and they cannot isolate. Then they must quarantine in all extracurricular activities. They may not return to school for 10 days, beginning the day after exposure. And then for 5 days after the 10-day quarantine, they must wear a well-fitted mask fully and completely in school settings, including at all times during athletics and extracurriculars, and social distance as best as possible during lunch and snack time. Again, it is important to note that this applies to those who are not vaccinated and are not included in the 90-day post-COVID positive window. That is the information that has been updated as of January 10th in the Strong Schools Toolkit. That is a summary of the information based on conversations with Annette Richardson, who is the nurse consultant for DPI and OCS, and Dr. Marilyn Pearson, who is the medical director for the Johnston County Health Department. Below is a paragraph that I will read that was written by Lisa Gordon Stella, that says that while the vast majority of the toolkit is optional guidance, page 15 and 16 are not. Schools must comply because they are 2 pages based on independent North Carolina statutory and regulatory requirements the schools must follow. This means that even if there were no Strong Schools Toolkit, schools would still have to follow pages 15 and 16 because they are required by North Carolina laws and regulations related to communicable diseases. In essence, pages 15 and 16 of the toolkit explain what schools must do to be in compliance with these laws and regulations. And for complete transparency, I have listed those below for our school community if they would like to look at them and research them on their own. The next piece of information I would like to share is based on information that was requested at our last meeting about masks. And these are just some data points for consideration. The percentage of vaccinated, fully, partially, none staff and students. So 11.8% of our students have up-to-date vaccinations that have been turned into News Charter School in relation to COVID. We sent out that survey that we discussed at the last meeting, which indicates that 25.9% of our staff claim they have received 2 shots in the booster, but the evidence that we have is that 11.1% of our staff have. So as with the last meeting, if anyone has any updated vaccinations that they haven't shared with the school in relation to COVID, we would be tremendously grateful for any updates that we can get in that regard. It certainly helps us with tracking numbers and decision-making for the board. As of the 18th of January, we have 114 students who are in the 90-day window, which means that within the last 90 days, they have had a positive COVID test. To give you some numbers on quarantining, this academic year so far, we have had 1,459 students quarantined. In December, there were 87. In January, from January 3rd when we came, or 6th when we came back to the 18th, there were 360. Positive cases this month, as of the 18th, that have been disclosed: students, 66, staff, 6. And finally, there was a question that we were supposed to answer, which was, what do we need from the board to offer a test to stay program? And this is where it gets very interesting, because all of the documentation and all of the data that we have received indicates that in order to have a test to stay program, you have to have a mask required setting. So again, in order to have a test to stay program, you have to implement a mask required setting. And that is the summary of the data. That is the summary of the updates that are in the Strong Schools Toolkit. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for now so that I can see you all. I will do my best to answer questions as I can, understanding that I'm not the expert in this one, but I will do my best.
Also, Dr. Blackwell, just in case for the board to note, in case you can't see everyone on your screen, Lisa Gordon-Stella, our HR attorney who did share that paragraph that Dr. Blackwell read, has joined the call and it can be asked questions as well if you'd like, or if there's a question that Dr. Blackwell isn't sure about and Lisa might know.
I have one question. What is I was looking at the document just trying to understand for understanding's sake, is in the test to stay, what is the difference between like having that versus not? Meaning what's the net effect of that one? Meaning, do we know? It's not clear to me. Meaning, if you have a mask only policy and let's say you don't implement test to stay, what does test to stay actually give us if we implement it?
Dr. Buckle, do you want me to try to answer? Sure. Rodney, that's a really good question. And I think that the way that provision is entitled is so confusing that I had to call the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services to ask them what the heck they meant by what was in the toolkit, because I didn't understand it. When I read it, I thought they would be, well, first of all, I just didn't really get it. The test to stay means nothing. All that, if you look at the 2 pages and you get down to where it says test to stay exposure, all that means is that if you are masking, this is what you do. If you're not, if you're mask optional, this is what you do. You don't have to have a, there's actually a test to stay is actually kind of a term of art. So I don't know why they put it in here, because it doesn't mean what it says. And when I spoke to the Department of Health and Human Services, I provided them that feedback and said, look, this is a really confusing provision. And why do you even have that? Why doesn't it just say exposure? You know, it doesn't make any, this, if you look at this exemption test to stay, just ignore that statement. All this is saying is that this is what you can do if you're in a mask required setting. And if you are not in a mask required setting, you would not be able to do this. Okay, that's all, that's what that last problem means, or that last line in the page 15 to 16 means. And it is not about test to stay. And I think that's where some of this confusion comes in, is just the nomenclature that's being used and the way this was written. And so does that answer your question, Rodney? Because it's a really good question. And we were all puzzling over it. And not just your school, other schools were also puzzling over what did they mean by what they said.
It's so basically ignore it because it's
yes.
ambiguous. Okay. And then you would think that that's more applicable in a mask optional environment.
You would absolutely think that 100%, and it just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. They are going to revise it, and shockingly, and they are taking input. So when I talked to the person, I asked, I said, who is taking feedback, because a lot of people have to digest this, and it's not necessarily particularly workable. And she said that she was taking feedback. If I had feedback, I could certainly share it with her, and she would bring it up to the people who are decision makers. The thing I will say is they were explaining that they are running various studies in mask optional versus mask schools to see if what they're thinking is bearing out, and see where there is the high transmission rates. One of the things that was brought up, and I don't think you can see it evidently by looking at page 15 and 16, is that originally the thought was that eating and drinking is going to be your highest way of transmitting the disease. But actually, even though it has the most likelihood of transmitting in school through eating and drinking because of the sheer number of people doing it every single day, where transmission rates are actually the problem, or the greatest problem, is in athletics, particularly the athletic sports that are going on right now. Indoor sports, a lot of contact. And so they are trying to narrow these provisions to reflect where the risks are, but it does take time. And we will see. But I am certainly happy to bring any feedback that folks would want me to bring to them, since I am going to be emailing them. And I tend to think this is going to get more and more optional as this goes on, as opposed to requiring in the next couple of months.
Okay, thank you. I just, when I read it, I wanted to make sure.
You're 100% right.
Other questions for Lisa or for Dr. Blackwell?
I would make a note. I think just for the recording, I do think we should pull up and show the other document that links the statutes to the control measures. Jane, I found that document very helpful, at least to answer the question that seems to be a lot of people like, what's legal, what's required versus what's not. So, I mean, the paragraph was good, but I think that document actually goes into the detail about the statute and the individual ones. We should make sure that's shared.
Okay. I don't have that handy on my screen, Dr. Blackwell, or Michelle has it. Yay. Thank you so much. I think it's a good point, Rodney. So, Michelle, did you want to explain it, or Rodney, or do you want Lisa?
So I'll kind of walk through it, and then anybody wants to chime in, I can kind of, but essentially it kind of goes through, I'll go over to the top. It comes from the Department of Health and Human Services, and it lays out the legal authority and requirements as it relates to dealing with COVID-19 in schools. I'm not going to read it word for word, and I'm just going to go through. It talks about the principal's duty to report, and it gives the statutory reference there. The health department has a duty to investigate, and it lists the specific statutes there. And then it gets down to the control measures, and it talks about a control measure, something which can reasonably be expected to decrease the risk of transmission of communicable disease, which is consistent with recent scientific and public health information. This actually comes from the North Carolina Administrative Code, which the statutory references that you'll see give the Public Health Commission the authority to create these rules under the North Carolina Administrative Code, which we're required to follow because they are codified. By law, all these are required control measures. By law, all persons, including schools and local school boards of education, shall comply. So it says shall comply with control measures prescribed by the Commission for Public Health. And And then it goes on, it talks about the Commission for Public Health has prescribed required control measures. It lists a specific administrative code there. For COVID-19, a specific control measure rule has not been adopted, and therefore the general control measure rule applies. I'm not going to go through it and read all of this. For COVID-19, these include, talking about the control measures, these include but are not limited to isolation for positive and suspected cases of COVID-19, quarantine for close contacts of COVID-19 cases, exclusion from school for confirmed and suspected cases and close contacts of COVID-19 cases, and contact tracing to identify and monitor individuals who have been exposed. This chart goes through and explains what contact tracing is and what quarantine is. And it talks about, this is, it's interesting here when it talks about quarantining pursuant to the CDC guidance and as part of the written and required control measures in North Carolina, persons exposed to COVID-19 are directed to self-quarantine. If an individual fails to adhere to this requirement, then a local health director or designee may issue a formal quarantine order pursuant to 130A-145. It goes through, also talks about isolation and exclusion. I think we all know what all of those mean. So the local health director is to give control measures. The local health director or designee is responsible for ensuring that proper control measures have been given and are being complied with. Control measures are given by informing people subject to control measures, which includes schools, about what is required. This information may be conveyed verbally or in writing. Here it says for schools, exclusion is a required control measure. This means that when a school is notified about an individual who has tested positive, the school has a legal obligation to exclude that individual and anyone else who has been exposed to COVID-19. Additionally, it is critical that the local health department and the school work together to contact trace and identify students, teachers, and staff subject to isolation or quarantine and exclusion control measures. The local health director or designee will provide guidance to the school about the applicable quarantine period if a shortened quarantine period is to be used. And so, when we're talking about the Strong Schools Toolkit and what Dr. Blackwell was saying about those specific provisions that were highlighted in red on pages 15 and 16 about those that are those required provisions. So those relate back, those statutory references relate back to those required provisions. So while you're looking at a lot of guidance, yes, in the Strong Schools Toolkit, some of that is actually required by administrative code or North Carolina statute. And again, this is a document related that comes from the Department of Health and Human Services, and you can find this on their website as well. Is there any specific place you want me to stop or look at or highlight?
I just think we need to put it in the materials just so that we can kind of refer back to it in our minutes about the legal linkage of the requirements.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Rodney. And thank you for explaining that, Michelle. It's very complicated. But this, as you said, this document comes from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services website, so people can find it there, as well as, if they have questions, I'm sure, we can help walk through that.
I can be sure that we link it on our COVID dashboard. We have resources underneath our dashboard. I can have that added in there.
That would be great. Thank you. And if you haven't already, I'm guessing you were planning to link the document that you shared earlier with the with the exclusion, the difference between mask required settings, and you're planning on linking that as well.
Yes, I will put all of that on that page.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. That was very helpful information. Any other questions or comments, either questions for Dr. Blackwell or for Lisa, or comments about what we've discussed up to this point?
Jane, one thing I will add that I did not highlight from the document, and because I guess it's not as significant when we're looking at those requirements in the Strong Schools Toolkit, but it does also discuss in there about the mask policy, about the Session Law 2021-130 that requires this board to vote each month on masks as well. So it does highlight that.
Okay, great. And you broke up a little bit on my end. I don't know if it on anybody else's, but I think what you said was that it's the law that requires this board to vote monthly on masks.
Yes, it's also highlighted in the document.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Dr. Blackwell, Lisa, thank you for your guidance and for the information. And Dr. Blackwell, especially thank you for your comments. It was obvious that they were heartfelt and I think very important for everyone to hear and to remember. So thank you for that. At this time, I will entertain a motion regarding our new charter school mask mandate.
I'll move that we continue the mask mandate until our February board meeting.
Thank you, Jason. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Michelle. Any additional discussion or questions on this motion?
I'll just say I spent a good bit of time today looking through the scenarios and thinking about a little bit about the history of kind of how this whole thing has evolved over time. One of the things I think we should remember too is that before, parents, didn't have an option for like vaccinating their student or their kids, right? And so it was really the only kind of method at the time. Now, if we look at it and you look at the reduced quarantining period, it is a little bit more, if it's in a mask optional environment. But it's 5 versus 10 days. And like was referenced, that those quarantining policies apply to if you're not in a 90-day window and also if you've not been quarantined. So I think it's important that, we realize that there are other options for parents, but when we require them to wear a mask, those parents don't have an option anymore. In the beginning, I feel like I was a little more on the fence, but now there are other options to for those kids to prevent being quarantined. So I just think that's important for us to remember. Now, the reality of who is or who's not, who's sharing it, and all that stuff, that's different. But if you actually ask about the choice that parents have, there are multiple.
Right. I'm sorry, Rodney. You've at least on my screen, you froze near the end there. So you said there are multiple, and then you froze, and we didn't hear anything else.
No, sorry. I was just saying that parents do have options in regarding to preventing quarantining for their kids beyond masks that they didn't have before.
Right, because as Dr. Blackwell explained, and as you're saying, for fully vaccinated students, I think is what you're referring to, right? That they wouldn't have to quarantine.
Or that they've actually had it. I mean, in the beginning, that wasn't even part of the project.
Right. Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Dr. Blackwell, can you remind me, I just don't remember what when you took the survey last, or I guess it was earlier this month, what those survey results were from the parents?
In terms of, do you want me to just?
It was like 50-50, Michelle. You're talking about
I wanted to know the percentage difference between the.
Yeah, it was like almost down the middle.
It was, yeah, I think it was 50. Just a moment. I'll pull it up for you. Just give me a second.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, that's tiny.
Yeah, thank you.
There we go.
For those of us with bad eyes, if you could read the numbers, there now I can see them. Thank you.
There you go. So the families who were in favor of requiring masks, it was 54.2%, which was 230 out of 424 responses. And the optional was 45.8, which was 194 out of 424 options. So you're at 230 to 194.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments, or discussion?
I just want to add, so, I voted both ways on this and over time through this. And I want all of our parents in our community to hear, I don't think there's anybody on the board who wants to continue to have our kids wearing masks. In a perfect world, we would blow this up today and we would go back to normal. But number one priority is, and we all can agree that the number one thing we all got to do is try to keep them in school. And if we want to keep them in school based on all the information that was presented with quarantining and how we go about it, masks right now. And again, if you go to North Carolina COVID dashboard and you see the case count, and you see the hospitalization rate, and I understand all the facts that kids are a lot more resilient from this, I voted no mask before. If we can get this Omicron under control and get it down a little bit more, I think we can go back to revisit that and go no mask again. And now we've got vaccines, and now hopefully this is the endemic. I mean, you read about the endemic. This is supposed to squelch it down far enough to where everybody will have some antibodies. We'll get through this, and hopefully we're looking at a future with no mask very soon. But for another month, I just personally opinion, and it's okay for people to disagree with me, but that for another month, I think we kind of got to go this way.
Well, the state regulation just doesn't seem to give you a choice.
And I don't disagree with that either, Paul.
Without telling the story, it just kind of reminds me of the old Jerry Clower talk about the guy hunting the raccoons. The raccoons have two choices. They can jump down and fight the dogs or stay up there and see if they get shot. It's not much of a choice. So.
Yeah. Thank you both for that. And I think that the information that's been shared has been really helpful. The updated information that Dr. Blackwell shared from DHHS, that in mask required settings, basically, even after exposure, most students do not have to quarantine. And that's a big change, as Dr. Blackwell shared. The only time that a student or staff member would have to quarantine after an exposure in a mask required school setting are any of those three situations: if they test positive, if they're symptomatic, or if they have someone in the home who's tested positive. And so to be able to have our students in a mask required setting be able to eat lunch, be able to participate in athletics, and not have to quarantine. They would have to wear a mask during athletics for 10 days, but other than that, they would not. The updated guidance that Dr. Blackwell shared, to me, is huge in terms of keeping students in school, because even with exposure, if we require masks, the vast majority of people do not, students or staff do not have to quarantine. So that's a big deal to me personally.
Right, but I do think we need to be careful when we say they have to meet the exposure requirements. It's not that everybody in a class, just because somebody tested positive, would have to quarantine.
No, right. Nobody, as long as the individual did not test positive, is not symptomatic, and does not have someone in the home who has tested positive, if we require masks, no one who is exposed would have to quarantine. That's what the first, is that right, Dr. Blackwell? Isn't that what that first block said on that document? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. And I know we keep asking you to toggle back and forth between 15 different documents.
It's okay. Okay, there it is.
So in a mask does not need to, individuals in a mask required school setting, if an individual has close contact with a COVID positive individual, including unmasked exposure during lunch or extracurricular activities, as long as it's not someone who's positive in their home, the individual does not need to quarantine and may return to school immediately. The only thing they have to do for 10 days is wear a well-fitting mask in school settings, and they would that does include athletics, and they need to try to social distance at lunch and snack time as much as possible. But otherwise, they get to return to school without any quarantine, and that is a huge change. That's been that to me is the biggest difference on this.
Right. So the difference is, if a mask optional, they would have to quarantine for 5 days.
That's right.
They would have to quarantine for 5 days, and and then the 5 extra days.
It's 5 days or not at all. But what I was specifically saying was that the definition of exposure, comes into play. It's not the whole class. It would be, you have to be within 3 months. What is it? 3 feet, 6 feet for 15 cumulative minutes in a 24-hour period. That's what I was conveying.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I misunderstood what you were saying. You were saying that it would only be the people close by them. Is that what you were saying?
It has to meet those exposure. Because here's what I tried to convey in the last meeting. At some point, when you look at vaccinations versus exposure, vaccinations as well as people that have had it in the last 90 days, and the definition of exposure, you start to realize you're actually constricting it pretty tightly. It's not, somebody's positive, everybody in the class, you got to go home. No, that's not true. That's not what the exposure definition is. So, I just think it's important that we understand the facts around what is being required by those rules in the definition of exposure. Which I do find it interesting if what, Lisa was saying about the sports, but yet our policy says we don't wear a mask in sports, but yet there seem to be finding that's where it's actually the transmission's coming, not in the other environments.
I should have been more clear. It's the organized sports, like your basketball team, but it may be, I didn't get that granular. Yeah. I do think, Rodney, you're hitting on a point that I think is really important, which is this communication you're putting out to your families after your decision about, where the legal basis is and about the what the rubric is for exposure. One of the things that helps schools move to mask optional and not worry is pushing parents to understand the implications of being vaccinated and how that can change your whole community and what for now and in the future. And so they have choices. You're 100% right. and now that parents have choices, they should understand that when they can exercise them, and their exercise or choosing not to could have academic implications, because I think everybody wants to be in a place where it's mask optional. And now that, it was a whole different ballgame a year ago when you had kids couldn't get vaccinated, and now that's not the case. But in schools that have higher rates among staff, among students, they have a lot more flexibility in what they can do and feel comfortable about it. And a lot of this, and obviously Dr. Bockwell and your administrative and leadership team can speak to it, is you're as much trying to prevent having more substitute teachers as anything out of this, because that's, so many schools are struggling with all these exposures, and how do you deal with them? And if people aren't vaccinated, you've got to quarantine and so there's just lots of moving parts to this that people now have within their power to protect themselves in a way that makes sense. And I think the more you can communicate that out, the more you can have a lot more flexibility. And yeah, even if people do have to quarantine, it's only 10% of your population that's going to miss those days, and you get to the, at Rodney, as you were saying, smaller and smaller amounts of people that are impacted, then it becomes a no-brainer whether or not there are implications to mask optional, right?
Yeah, that's the exact.
And that's I think, and I think the more you can drive that home to your community, the quicker that happens. And maybe we have another variant down the road, but if you can get more people who are protected, both staff and students, you're going to be in a better place. And, God knows everyone wants to be done with masks.
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that there is a scenario by which, those people have those options. And the other part, I find it very interesting that 50% of the people can respond, say they won't think masks should be required. And we're not north of 50% vaccinated. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't vaccinate. That's a personal opinion to me, 100%, right? But I can't help but look at that data and be like, that doesn't make sense. So, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, Lisa. Other comments, questions before we vote on the motion that is on the table? Okay, hearing none, I will call the roll. The motion on the table, as a reminder, is to continue our mask mandate until our February board meeting. And I will call the roll. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Sorry, my to me. Okay, Nicole and Michelle both said aye. Rodney.
Opposed.
Jason.
Aye.
Jennifer. Robbie. Still has not joined. Okay. Benji.
Opposed.
Paul.
Aye.
And I will vote aye. So the ayes have it. Motion carries. Our mask mandate is continued until our February meeting. And for parents and community members, you should be able to review the documents that we went over once they are posted to our website. Okay. Thank you all for that. Back to the agenda, we have ongoing board development and self-assessment. We are not doing. We do need to move into closed session. So I will entertain a motion to move into closed session for personnel and administrative discussion and legal guidance pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes 318.11 A1, A3, and A6. I'm sorry. Thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jason. I will call the roll to vote to move into closed session. Nicole.
Jane,
sorry.
Yeah, so discussion on that. On the motion.
Discussion, I'm sorry.
I want to make sure that the statute, it's 143-318.11, and then.
Sorry, I left off the 143 part. Sorry about that. 143, 318.11, A1, A3, and A6. Thank you.
Meticulous
I'm so glad we
law
have lawyers.
board there.
I know. I'm so glad. I'm so grateful. Okay, so now I will officially call the roll to vote to move into closed session. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
And Paul.
Aye.
Wonderful. I will see you all in closed session. Thank you. Okay, we are back in open session. We do have a quorum, and so I will entertain a motion to approve the personnel recommendations made by Dr. Blackwell in closed session.
So moved.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Benji.
Benji did.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I will call the roll to vote on the personnel recommendations made by Dr. Blackwell. Nicole.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Rodney.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Jennifer.
Aye.
Benji.
Aye.
And Paul.
Aye.
And motion carries. Personnel recommendations are approved. And now I will, having reached the end of our agenda, I officially say that this Neuse Charter School Board of Directors meeting is officially adjourned at 9:09 p.m. on January 25th, 2022. Thank you all very, very much for all of the time and energy and effort that went into this meeting. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope everybody has a great night.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jane.
Bye.
Bye.